Very much, Vice-Chancellor. We will then move on to the questions on notice. I'd like to thank all of our members who have submitted their questions on notice. The first question is from Dr. Raj Kurup. Does UWA have a professional asset management group, both physical infrastructure and digital, headed by a professional at chief engineer level? The objective is to bring value for money while maintaining and upgrading the existing infrastructure. Vice-Chancellor, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Dr. Kurup, for your very pertinent question. So before I give you the short answer, let me tell you that over the last several years, because of our fiscal challenges, we have unfortunately allowed our physical and digital infrastructure to significantly degrade. So we have a lot of work ahead of us to bring those infrastructure up to speed, and the work has already begun. But it'll be a long journey simply because of the neglect that has been incurring and the cost associated with it. Just on the physical infrastructure, our rough estimate is that we have at least an $800 million deficit. So, we will have to take a look at some of those challenges, taking a multi-year approach. Probably it'll take a decade for us to get back to where we want to be. In terms of your question, do we have professionals? Yes, we do. Do you have enough of them? Probably not. I say probably not. I don't know for sure. But what I can tell you is that to deal with the budget deficit, we had to cut professional services budget by about 20%. So when you cut 20% from your limited budget, that has to have some negative impact. So that also means that at some point in time into the future, we have to actually rebuild our professional teams commensurate with just the physical and digital investments that we have to make. Certainly it's on our radar, and we have a multi-year plan tackling the issue. Obviously, it'll take some time, and the more we can bring resources, the faster we can act on this.
Thank you. We'll move then to question number 2, also from Dr. Raj Kurup. Has UWA planned and developed strategies for the future of university education in a competitive and uncertain world? How will we deal with the negative impact of online classes and loss of networking amongst students? Perhaps Professor Ray De Silva may wish to comment on that one.
Thank you. Look, a question after my own heart. The thing is, there's no university that has actually anticipated and dealt with the pandemic-related issues that have arisen. What we all have been, though, is surprised by the extent to which students at present still feel so attached to the face-to-face mode of learning. And so, just to give you one example, there's been a sense that maybe the students from overseas would be less receptive to coming to Australia, but it turns out there's still a lot of strong demand. So the old-fashioned model is actually holding up better than most people would expected. There's a lot of talk about disruption, etc., because from online learning, and people are talking about this is the future of learning. It's not happening. Just as much as you would like to be here in face-to-face, so would the students like to be here. And that's proved more effective. To give you an example, one reason why we don't have a global university in the same way that you have, say, Coles. So you have a Coles supermarket and you have the same branding all over. But we don't have a Murdoch University all over Australia, for instance. And the reason is that proximity really matters in education. So where the buildings are located, meetings. And in fact, students, what's useful about education in a university isn't so much the classes, but also how the students get together. So your second question is really to the point. You can't really have a university online. Well, you can to a degree, but no pun intended. But what really is the prestigious universities, the ones that matter, are face-to-face universities. So that's why I was really welcome the initiatives that the Gil Ami described in his talk. I think that's going to be a really important part of keeping university a vital place for students.
Oh, thank you. Perhaps then we can move to question number 3 from Mr. Gary Ellis. What steps are being taken to ensure the raising of the standard of international students enrolling in UWA postgraduate courses? Vice-Chancellor, would you like to comment on that?
I'll be happy to, Warden. First, let me assure you that we already attract some very, very top scholars from around the world, and know about some of our programs. Those of us who are familiar with some of them, I don't know about all of them, but I'm familiar with some of them. They are really, really good students. So how do we attract more, or even better quality or higher quality? Well, it goes without saying, students who come to study with us at postgraduate level, even at undergraduate level, they are primarily attracted to us because of the quality of our instruction, our research. So we are a quality institution, notwithstanding our various challenges. There should be no doubt that this is a very fine quality institution. So at the postgraduate level, you have to take it one step further down. You have to look at professors and the research labs, research institutes. So the quality of the research work determines how attractive those programs are. Just to give you an example, one of our very distinguished professors, now Professor Emeritus, but still very, very active, is Professor David Blair. So I was visiting Professor Blair's lab, in that Jingin, I think it's called, area, and met with a number of his PhD students. And one student happened to be from Canada. And I'm always interested why students choose particular universities. So as a Canadian, I asked him, where he was from and what brought him to UWA. And the answer is very simple. It's the wonderful work, world-class research that David Blair and his team are doing. That was the reason why he is here. So the story can be repeated many times over. We have taken a number of steps. We are blessed by having members of Convocation, alumni, if you will, North American language of describing this group would be alumni. Any graduate of this university, whether it's full-time graduate or part-time graduate, doesn't matter. They are part of our extended family. So we are lucky to have Andrew Forrest as one of our distinguished graduates, and he created this Forrest Research Foundation. So the objective of Forrest Research Foundation is to bring top students from Australia and beyond to study at WA's 5 universities in many different disciplines. So it's not discipline specific. I noted that Ray was talking about research being more biased towards STEM. So the program is just open-ended. You can study anything as long as you're on top of your game. You can compete for the scholarship. So that program brings in 24 of PhD scholars and postdoctoral fellows. I had the privilege of living in Forest Hall for about 6 weeks, and I saw firsthand, the sort of caliber of students who are coming through those sort of programs. So we actually know what we have to do to attract top students. We are doing some of it. We just need to do more of it.
Thank you, Vice-Chancellor. I'll move to question 4, which in some ways does match what you've already said about international students. From Ms. Helen van der Riet, why has our international ranking status fallen? Well, Ray De Silva said he will, but hear from you both.
Okay. Look, I don't think it has. I think it's remained remarkably stable. There is some volatility. So if you have one or two people leave the university, so these rankings are based largely on research. And if you have one or two people having a particularly good year, or maybe someone might leave, then there's a considerable change in the rankings. So we had a field medalists a couple of years back, and that shot us up. But that was just one person who happened to come here as an undergraduate. And that moved our ranking quite a considerable amount. But this kind of a question then betrays, as I said, the priorities. These rankings don't take into account the quality of education. So you could have, one can imagine a question being, has our quality of education decreased or increased? And you wouldn't tell from the rankings. We're still a very good university, in fact, an excellent university in terms of education, but this isn't particularly counted in our rankings. So, but this, again, it's not a trivial question, because I care, even though if we were the top business school in the world, it wouldn't shift us in the ranking so much, because it's mainly the STEM sciences that are included. But the fact is, even though our research ranking owes a lot to our STEM things, it matters for me. I get a sense of pride. So I just want to say that this question reinforces this point, that the model of a research rank-based university and what goes towards what the things that are required to make that great are things that in some ways all of us support, even though we might think, there's too much of a focus on the sciences, not enough on the humanities. But this reflects our conflicting views. We want excellent education, but we also want excellent rankings.
Well, then I'll move to question number 5 from Miss Lena Bakshi. Whose perspective counts? The last few months has seen major programs cut at UWA. Amongst the many rationales was that social science programs in their pure form lack applicability. In a brave new world of mergers, which are economic decisions, what is the place and status of disciplines that are not seen as having real-world applicability? Ray, would you like to speak?
Sure. Again, this is one of those things that is, universities try to cater to multiple constituencies, and I think at UWA we have degrees such as the ones that I teach in the business school with accounting and finance that have, as it were, real-world, or we like to imagine, real-world applicability. But then you also have degrees such as philosophy, which I also think happens to have real-world applicability that Ami has enrolled in, and then we have music, and these are all real-world disciplines. So everything that we teach is part of the real world, although it is true that some of them have more economic return than others. But you can't be a university, and UWA is not that kind of university. It hasn't been for since it began, where we focus exclusively on those disciplines that have an economic return. It is true that we have discussions, and quite heated discussions on occasion, about how much we should support some degrees that aren't as popular as others, because in the main, the ones that have some economic return or some perceived economic return are the more popular ones. Having said that, I should say that there's a large proportion of students that don't come to university purely for the economic return, but also come for a broad education, for a life of the mind. And there has been and always will be a place at UWA for those kind of people, and we'll offer those kind of universities. So we are a comprehensive university.
Thank you. Well, question 6 from Dr. Wayne Griffiths. What happens to staff when a merger goes through? Wouldn't it lead to massive redundancies? So again, I'll call upon you.
Yeah, no, look, it could, and undoubtedly one reason for a merger, particularly in the commercial world, is that you want to get rid of excess capacity, so you get rid of staff. That probably won't happen in the university if there is in fact a merger, because for that to happen, for a merger to go ahead, you'd have to get agreement amongst all the stakeholders. As I mentioned in my talk, everyone can throw a spanner in the works. There are many people who can throw an effective spanner in the works. And for example, the University of Manchester, which was a merger heavily supported by the government and which was in the making for many years, the only reason that got through is because they explicitly promised not to have any forced redundancies. So whilst this might be an outcome that some may devoutly wish for, that we could get rid of surplus stuff, it probably would happen if there was a merger, because there would be one of the conditions for that merger would be that there wouldn't be any mass redundancies. The other point is that, of course, when you have a merger, then maybe we can move people to other disciplines so we can have some economies of scale. It's not just all about reducing disciplines. In academia, economies of scale, having a discipline of a critical mass does matter in terms of your standing.
Oh, thank you. Question 7 has come from Miss Becky Stevens. What is the future for online hybrid delivery post-COVID, and how prepared is UWA to provide such delivery? Vice-Chancellor, would you like to start the comments on that, please?
Happy to, Warden. Very good question. What we have demonstrated over the last year and a half is our ability to get things done when it is required. Prior to COVID, we are not online ready at all, but in response to the challenges COVID had thrown at us, we all were able to put all our courses, most of them at least, online very quickly. So that's a success. But underneath that success, while we were able to put them online, I'm not certain that we have adopted the best available pedagogy, or for that matter, even technology, in doing what we have done. So we have a lot of catch up to do. I agree with Ray's observation that we will remain an on-campus university, and in fact, it is our intention to enhance the on-campus life of the university. But having said that, I think the hybrid model will be very useful for us to enhance our learning experience, both for on-campus students, and also will give us ability to reach out to off-campus students, be they in various regions of the state or overseas. So we have a lot of work to do, and work is underway. We are going to put together a group of colleagues to think about it and see what we need to do to make significant investment in our digital delivery capabilities. Right now, I don't think we are at the top of our game. We have managed to deal with the challenges that have been thrown at us, and we have done very well. But that creates the opportunity for us to take a good look at it and see what more can be done.
Can I just add to that answer? And good to hear from you, Becky. A hybrid model, when you do anything online, students actually expect a higher quality. They expect something that they might see from, in the cinema type of thing. So it's actually quite expensive to put up a high quality hybrid online model. At the moment, we get away with it because people are forgiving. I mean, students are forgiving. They know that we're just fumbling around and trying to turn on the things, and if the mic isn't on or you cut off, as happened to me in my last lecture, they're forgiving. But if this became the standard, they would demand much more, and that would be much more expensive to provide. And even though we have in some classes quite large numbers of students, it's really not that economical. You've got to reach out in the many thousands of students to make that kind of a return. So in classes, in physical, in-person classes are actually in some respects much cheaper to deliver than online, even though people think online it's easier. It's not. It's certainly not as. It's certainly more expensive than most people seem to appreciate.
Would the Guild President like to add some comment from a student's point of view?
Yeah, I think it is really reassuring to hear from the Vice-Chancellor that the university's intent is to focus on the on-campus experience. because that is, for a lot of students, why you come to UWA. If UWA's offerings was just an online course, why would a student not choose to go to any other uni that provided an online course? I know, for example, that MIT provide a lot of their courses online for free for students or for anyone, but why do students still choose to pay to go to MIT? And the reason is because of their campus culture, because of their face-to-face interactions with faculty, with that opportunity to learn not in isolation in your own bedroom, but to learn in a physical space with other people. And I think that that's where a lot of the value comes from university. That's where I've personally found a lot of my value. So it is really reassuring to hear that the university is looking to bring students back to campus, because I think that is and should be where university should be looking to go. That is definitely what students want. So yeah.
Thank you. Well, moving to the next question, which is from Mr. Rick Stern. Is it a directive from the Vice-Chancellor or from the Premier of Western Australia that prevents us from meeting in person at UWA? Perhaps the Vice-Chancellor would like to answer that one?
Yes, I will. Let me tell you a joke about Vice-Chancellor. So this question implies the Vice-Chancellor has a great deal of authority. So here goes the joke. What is a Vice-Chancellor? Well, Vice-Chancellor is like a caretaker of a graveyard. A lot of people underneath, but nobody listens. So Vice-Chancellor's ability to direct is very, very limited. So I don't believe that I have directed anything that is related to the meeting or convocation. Having said that, WA government has provided us with directions, how many people we can have in a room and those sort of things. And on top of that, of course, we have Health and Safety Act that requires us to provide a workplace environment that is as safe as we can make it out to be. I think it's those considerations that prevents us from bringing large group like this under some sort of auditorium. So I think that's really and the rules and regulations that you have to abide by. Example of that would be, number of classes have large number of students. And in fact, Ray himself teaches a large class. And left to Ray, he would have liked his students to come physically, but we couldn't meet the requirements that are imposed. So as a result, we had to move all our courses online during the phase 2 of these restrictions. As soon as that phase 2 restriction is lifted, then obviously we'll be moving into a different mode.
Oh, thank you very much. Question 9 from Mr. Peter Farr. I wish to follow up on an issue I raised at a convocation meeting several years ago. Has the university yet provided convenient IT to use public Wi-Fi for visitors to the Crawley campus? Who would like to respond to that?
I'm happy to take it on. Not happy, I'm willing to take it on. So the answer is no, and I'm not happy about the answer that I just gave you. So let me give you the excuse. Some of you may know that I came from Canada. So this would not be an issue at my previous institution. So that's why I'm not happy about what we have to do. However, for very good reason, our concern about cybersecurity and related matter, we have to restrict access to our Wi-Fi network to protect the computer systems we have, the database we have from various types of hacking and interference. So that leads to certain rules that you have to abide by. So we are part of a network called AARNet. And that ARNet organization protects us from many of these attacks. And as part of that agreement, we cannot provide access to our network to anybody who is not a student or a staff of the university. So that is the reason why we can do it, but I very much regret that we cannot do it.
Thank you. Well, moving to question 10 from Mrs. Anne Willocks. Who chooses the flags the campus flies? My comment there is that I believe it would be the Senate would choose on the recommendation from the Vice-Chancellor. Perhaps the Vice-Chancellor would like to correct me.
It is governed by a policy called UWA flag policy. Ultimately, I'm pretty sure Senate has the authority over that policy, but it might have been delegated to others. It is now managed by our Chief Advancement Officer. We don't have an external executive member in charge of external matters. So our Chief Advancement Officer effectively is our Chief External Affairs Officer. So CAO manages the policy or implements the policy. I don't think I can add beyond that.
Thank you. Well, question 11 is from Mrs. Pauline Tremlett. Why are members of Convocation not receiving information about the major changes being implemented in the UWA structure and administration? Some degree of consultation would also have been appropriate. I would like to make some comments on that, namely that in fact the members of Convocation have been receiving information from myself as warden in the e-newsletter called Convocation Connect. The degree of consultation with Convocation from the university, whether or not that is appropriate or not, perhaps the Vice-Chancellor would like to comment.
Well, first, let me simply recognize that we cannot possibly be over-communicating with any particular stakeholder, Convocation included. We just need to do more. So the question is, what is the best way of communicating? And we are challenged by that. So if you have any suggestions how best we can do it.
Thank you.
Certainly the intention is to have more communication, not less. But how we go about do it is a challenge. Your suggestions.
Thank you. Well, question number 12 from Mr. Jeff Gunningham is directed to you. What does the Vice-Chancellor feel is the appropriate role of Convocation in the governance of the university? Does he see a need for change in the way it operates?
Well, thank you for that question. The first part of the question, the answer to the first part of the question is, the formal part of it is governed by our Universities Act. And that calls for Convocation to elect 2 members of Senate. And I have the pleasure of working with the 2 current members and a previous member. They do a fantastic job. So number one, they bring the perspective of Convocation to the deliberation of Senate. And secondly, they participate in all earnest, in all the governance of the university. So they are valuable members. But that's just the formal part. If you looked at the broader definition of Convocation, who is Convocation? Forgetting the legal part. Well, Convocation comprises of graduates of the university. It is my strong view that any university of our age and reputation should endeavor to have most, if not all, the members of the governing board, in this case Senate, who are graduates of the university. And with few exceptions, ex officio. Unfortunately, I did not graduate from this university, so I'm an ex officio member who is a non-graduate. And to the best of my knowledge, I could find only one more, maybe two more. And the rest of the members of our Senate are graduates of this university. So by definition, they are actually members of convocation. So that is appropriate, and that is exactly how it should be. And the reason for that is who has more commitment to this place, greater ownership of the place than the graduates of this university. So from my point of view, that works very well. The question is, the second part of the question, do I think there is a need for change? I think there is opportunity for graduates of this university to engage with us in a much more significant way than is the case now. So, you'll have your list of things. Here are list of items that I can suggest to you where your university needs help. I believe as Vice Chancellor, where I need help. So we do poorly in local surveys. When you look at employer survey, we came out last in WA. I just can't believe that to be true, because we produce some of the finest graduates in the state, and yet there is a gap between perception and reality. So first thing you can do is to be our voices. Wherever you go, whoever you meet, talk about our graduates. So that's one. Second one, if you can create opportunities for internships for our students, that would be wonderful. Our students need that exposure to the job market, and internship is the best way of doing it. So you can help us with that. And then if your resources permit, if we would consider supporting a favorite project at the university, whether it's creating a scholarship, creating a chair, or supporting something else, that would be wonderful. So there are just so many different ways of, engaging with the university. Governance would be the last thing I would worry about, because vast majority of our senators are actually members of convocation. I think that is working out wonderfully well.
Thank you. Question 13 is from Dr. Danu Tanu. Why were the social science questions grouped together in the last meeting and allocated less time in the meeting and less space in the mentioned autumn agenda booklet, but I think she means the spring agenda booklet, as though they are not as important as other questions? Vice Chancellor?
I think that we have suffered from in our recent past.
Thank you. Question 14, also from Dr. Danu Tanu. Why was the chat function at the spring ordinary meeting disabled to prevent graduates or convocation members from participating? Well, I would like to comment there to let Dr. Tanu know that at any webinar, the participants can only watch, listen and respond to polls. The chat function, the microphone and the video are routinely disabled. So moving to question number 15 from Dr. Yukimi Shimoda. I would like to know how the convocation of UWA graduates thinks about the loss of experts and knowledge brought by the changes in social sciences as well as its consequences. Again, Vice-Chancellor, you may wish to make a comment.
Just very briefly, no university undertakes this sort of exercises because it's fun to do. Reality of the situation was we had been living beyond our means for a long time, and the university was on the verge of not having enough cash to pay the bills. So it was a financial crisis. We needed to deal with it, and we needed to move fast. And that resulted in the structural reform program. And I'm delighted to report to convocation that the fiscal recovery plan that we have put together, totaling $150 million, all in, 70% cost out, 80% revenue growth, we are halfway through. So within a short period of time, we have achieved a lot, but obviously at a great deal of cost. So some of the issues that have been raised are on the cost side of the equation. So second part of it is relevant to the talk Professor Da Silva gave on merger. So I'm not going to comment on merger, except to say that this university was the only university at one point in time. When competition came along, we didn't feel the need to do things differently because we are way ahead of the game. Things have changed. We now have competition locally. Other universities have come along. As a result, and some of the mistakes that we have made, we have lost enrollment. So the number of students we have lost between 2012 and 2018, if you actually added it up and took the average income that you would have derived from those students, the number would have been about $50 to $70 million. And guess what? Our structural deficit was at $70 million. So circumstances forced our hands. We needed to do something. And the decisions were made through a rigorous process. Obviously, people who don't like the outcome, they don't like the process, but it was not made by a single person. And at the end of the day, ultimately, it is the responsibility of Senate. And Senate had charged the Vice Chancellor and me to deal with the crisis that we had at hand, and we have done the best that we can. The outcome at the end of the day for individuals, for specific schools, had been painful. But I have absolutely no doubt is the best thing that we could have done, and it'll make our university a much more vibrant and stronger place in the days to come.
Oh, thank you very much. Question number 16 from Dr. Tim Diamond. Can the Vice-Chancellor or his representative update convocation on the situation of the Burnt Museum? Will it have a director and adequate staff, and will it provide access for Gurindji elders to their people's material in the burnt archives?
So 3 parts to the question. I'm happy to try to answer all 3. Many taking part in this meeting will probably not know what we mean by a museum. My own expectation of a museum would be an appropriate facility, a building where we display our collections. So let me tell you what I have found. We have a very rich collection, very rich indeed. We are privileged to have that collection. Actually, we don't have a physical facility called museum. So I just wanted to clarify. So a rich collection. From time to time, we display part of the collection in the Lawrence Wilson Art Gallery. So that's a separate thing. We don't have a building. We don't have a facility. So let's understand that. We would like to have a facility. We'd like to have a building. So maybe I can challenge interested convocation members to work with us to explore whether actually members of convocation can help us with some fundraising. If we can find $25 million, we can do something with it. So second part of the question is, will it have a director? Well, the answer is, I do not know. We were living beyond our means. We had significant overhead in everything that we did. And we decided to protect the academic side to the extent that we could. As a result, the cuts that were administered, 10% of the cut was given to the academic side, administrative side, professional side to 20% cut. So museums and other things, they fall under that professional side. So I have no idea what our resources will or will not permit, but we certainly do not have the resources that allowed us to deploy the sort of people that we did in the past. Will we go back to those days again? I suspect not, because it is those sort of behavior that caused us the grief that we are trying to overcome from. Last part of the question is access to the material. Well, the Burns left their notebooks as part of the collection, but in their trust agreement with the university, they also required that the university will not notebooks public for a certain period of time. I think it's 30 years after the death of the last surviving member. So that timeline, I think, is 2025. And in the meantime, there have been a great deal of interest from many quarters to access those notebooks. Unfortunately, our legal obligation stands. We cannot sign a legally binding agreement and then renege on it. The only way we will be able to open those notebooks to scholars and others if we are ordered by higher authority. And suddenly, university doesn't have that authority. So that's just the simple reality of what it is.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'll move to the last question from Dr. Thomas Wilson. When will major land sales begin to have the money to rejuvenate the Crawley campus? I have asked Ray to comment.
Right, sure. Look, I think the Crawley campus looks lovely. I love coming to work here every day, and it's one of the joys of my life. But certainly the IT could do with a lot of improvement. And I'm reliably informed that lots of the buildings could do with some serious upgrade. I'm not an engineer. The Vice Chancellor is an engineer, but I'm assured by the engineering types that there's a lot of work to be done. My understanding is that this kind of rejuvenation has to go on all the time. So if we started selling off land every time we needed to fix up the campus, it wouldn't be long before we began to get into trouble. Which is why this restructuring program has been quite important, because we're looking to free up something like 70 million, have a turnaround of about 150 million, and 70 million free to be able to attend to things like rejuvenating the campus, getting Wi-Fi. One problem that we have is that across the campus, it's very inconsistent Wi-Fi. If you have more than a few tens of students, the Wi-Fi drops out. So there's work to be done. A lot of that work also takes place over a few years. I was under, again, having a finance background, not an engineering background. I thought we could fix up the Wi-Fi in a couple of months, just put in a couple of towers, put in a few accounts with Telstra. But it turns out that this will take 2 years to get all the buildings fully up to scratch. And it's not for lack of money, it's just for lack of time and the capacity for people to get around the buildings. But yeah, when people talk about rejuvenating the campus, in terms of its looks, it looks great. It's one of the best campuses in the world, I reckon.
Indeed, very beautiful. Well, this concludes the questions on notice. Thank you very much, Professor Chakma, Professor Ray De Silva Rosa, and Mr. Amita Jagannathan for your discussion of the questions. In conclusion, thank you to all the people who have assisted me in the preparation of this event. I wish to thank the Chancellor, the Honourable Robert S. French AC, the Vice-Chancellor, Professor Amit Chakma, the immediate past warden, Dr. Doug McGee, Adjunct Professor Warren Kerr AM, and Deputy Warden Adjunct Professor Dr. Brett Davies for their encouragement since I have taken office. To the members of Convocation Council, I pledge to continue to do my best, as I will be the immediate past warden for 12 months, to advance the reputation of the university and in so doing serve the community. A special thank you to Ms. Juanita Perez, Convocation Officer, and to Ashley Bradshaw and Harriet Calverley, who have all played a major role coordinating the arrangement for this ordinary meeting. Thanks also goes to Perth Audio Visual, who have recorded this meeting, which will soon be available on the Convocation website. Perhaps allow 1 week for that to happen. So thank you all for attending the meeting. I now declare the Autumn Ordinary Meeting of Convocation for 2022 closed at 8:10.